When we think about what really defines global power, shapes international relations today, our minds often jump straight to things like oil reserves, maybe cutting-edge digital networks, or, well, military might. But what if the most fundamental resource of all, something absolutely essential for, well, every living thing on this planet? What if that is quietly emerging as the primary driver of how nations interact? In this century, anyway. Today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, how water is rapidly transforming into a critical geopolitical force, how it's reshaping alliances, sometimes fueling conflicts, and also driving diplomatic efforts across the globe. So our mission here is to really unpack the key insights from the source material we've looked at. We want to explore how these relentless pressures, climate change, booming population growth, and ever-expanding industry, how they're straining freshwater reserves everywhere. The goal is to give you a really clear understanding of water's pivotal role, help you connect the dots on this, well, absolutely vital global issue. I mean, I find it personally quite intriguing how something so basic to life itself can also become such a potent source of tension. And importantly, a catalyst for cooperation, too. It really feels like water isn't just about survival anymore, but it's a foundation, a real foundation of political power and economic stability for nations.
It's a huge shift, isn't it? And what's particularly striking, I think, is how different water is from, say, fossil fuels. Nations can often substitute those, find alternatives, or import them from halfway across the world if needed. But access to water is fundamentally dictated by geography. Rivers, lakes, aquifers, they just don't care about national borders. They often flow across multiple countries. And this inherently binds nations together, creates these deeply interdependent relationships.
Interdependent, right.
And because of that geographical reality, the possibility of, well, water wars, it's not just some dramatic headline anymore. It's a looming challenge, something we need to pay serious attention to, and frankly, something we're seeing unfold right now in various parts of the world.
That geographical dependency, that really stands out. We've historically seen resources like, energy or tech as these big drivers of global competition. But you're saying water's geography makes it fundamentally different. Could you maybe elaborate a bit on how that unique characteristic really links nations, for better or worse, maybe in a way the resources don't? What are the sort of immediate implications?
Yeah, that's a really crucial distinction. The fact that a river, let's take the Nile or the Mekong, flows through multiple sovereign states means that whatever happens upstream, well, it directly impacts populations downstream. You can't just reroute it easily. You can't just replace that specific water source. So this inherent connection, coupled with all the mounting pressures from climate change, we're talking melting glaciers, changing river flows, monsoons becoming totally erratic, causing floods or droughts. You've got desertification spreading, sea levels rising and contaminating coastal freshwater, all that, plus relentless population growth and industrial demand. It all combines to transform water into this core determinant of peace, cooperation, or yes, even conflict. It stops being just about whether individuals have enough to drink. It becomes about the very political power and economic stability of entire nations. When water scarcity really bites, it hits everything. Agriculture, food security, industry, public health. It becomes an absolutely indispensable strategic asset.
Right, and that really brings us to where the rubber meets the road, doesn't it? Our source material points to these specific regional flashpoints, places where water is already causing significant tension. But what's also compelling, it flags these surprising instances where water has actually fostered, well, unexpected collaborations. So where are we seeing this dynamic playing out most vividly right now?
Oh, we see it quite clearly in several critical river basins. The Nile River Basin, for example, that's a classic case. You've got 11 countries across Africa connected by it, each deeply dependent on that river's flow. But their needs often clash: development versus agriculture versus energy. The current tensions are particularly sharp around Ethiopia's construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GERD, this absolutely massive project on the Blue Nile. Well, it's created significant friction, especially with downstream nations like Egypt and Sudan, who rely so heavily on the Nile's waters historically and, existentially. It's forced intense diplomatic negotiations, often needing external mediators because it's just such a high-stakes game. You're balancing Ethiopia's legitimate development goals against the historic water rights and, frankly, the survival needs of its neighbors. It really highlights how tightly bound nations become over a shared vital resource.
And presumably it's not just happening in Africa. Moving across continents, where else do we see similar kinds of pressures building? Potential for conflict, but maybe also that collaboration piece.
Absolutely, it's not unique to the Nile. Look at South Asia, for instance. You have the Indus Waters Treaty between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
Historically, that's been a pretty remarkable achievement, right? Mediating water sharing between these two, often antagonistic nuclear powers, since way back in 1960.
Yeah, it's held up surprisingly well sometimes.
It has. It's been critical for decades. But now, it's under severe strain. You've got climate stress reducing river flows, making water availability much more unpredictable. Combine that with the ongoing political mistrust, well, sustained cooperation becomes incredibly difficult. The very lifeline for millions in both nations is caught in this really precarious balance between environmental change and deep-seated geopolitical rivalry. And then there's another critical area, maybe less visible in the headlines, but just as significant, Central Asia. Here you have the post-Soviet republics. They were once under this unified, centrally managed water system during the Soviet era.
Right, Moscow controlled it all.
Exactly. But now they face the incredibly complex task of renegotiating water and energy rights and responsibilities amongst themselves. And this whole process is often influenced, sometimes heavily, by external powers, think Russia, China, or maybe other international investors.
How so? What's the influence look like?
Well, these external actors might offer development loans, but perhaps tied to resource access. Or they might secure long-term energy contracts in exchange for backing certain water-sharing deals, or fund big infrastructure projects like dams that inevitably reshape local water priorities. Everyone's looking to secure their own strategic interests in the region, which adds, another layer of complexity to already very delicate negotiations.
Okay, so we've definitely seen the clear potential for tension boiling over in these regions. But you also mentioned those unexpected collaborations. I mean, in a world where water can be such an obvious flashpoint, where have nations actually managed to build bridges instead of, digging deeper divides?
That's such a powerful point, and it's really crucial to highlight these cases, too. What's quite insightful, I think, is that in the Middle East, a region we often associate primarily with conflict water, has paradoxically become both a tool of leverage and a surprisingly potent arena for collaboration.
Really? How does that work?
Well, consider the incredibly complex relationships between Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian territories. Even amidst these profound, broader hostilities, they've managed to put in place water-sharing agreements and even some joint management initiatives. Now, these are often fragile, no doubt, but they have served as really crucial confidence-building measures over the years.
That's interesting.
It really demonstrates that shared crises, if they're managed with some foresight and, crucially, through robust institutions, can actually open pathways to cooperation. It fosters what our source material calls hydrodiplomacy. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If even amidst such deep political divides, the sheer necessity of water can forge these pathways to dialogue. Well, what does that tell us about our capacity for cooperation when we're faced with truly existential threats? Necessity sometimes really is the mother of invention.
That is an inspiring thought, actually, that shared adversity can force cooperation.
But let's maybe broaden the scope now, beyond just these specific regional disputes. Our source material really emphasizes how water geopolitics isn't just a local issue anymore. It's actually shaping global alliances and influencing foreign policy decisions on a much, much grander scale. How do these localized water dynamics sort of ripple outwards onto the global stage? How are they fundamentally altering alliances far beyond just one river basin?
That's a critical shift in perspective, absolutely. If we pull back and look at the broader strategic landscape, China's strategic control over the Tibetan Plateau is just incredibly significant. This region, often called the Third Pole because it holds the largest reserve of fresh water outside the Arctic and Antarctic, serves as the source for many of Asia's greatest rivers.
The headwaters for so many countries. Exactly. This gives China an immensely powerful upstream position as that plateau feeds major rivers flowing across South and Southeast Asia. So China's extensive dam building and potential water diversion projects up there, they directly affect downstream nations like India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and others. These actions aren't just creating environmental and resource challenges for those countries, they're also contributing to completely new geopolitical alignments. They're shaping discussions within the broader Indo-Pacific context as nations scramble to manage their water security in the shadow of this huge upstream power.
So it's changing strategic calculations then.
Definitely. And this isn't just about China or specific rivers. Globally, you see international financial institutions, major world powers, they are increasingly using water security as a critical lens for their foreign policy decisions, for their aid distribution, for their development strategies. It's moved beyond being just a niche environmental concern. It's now treated as a core component of national security, economic stability, even human rights in some contexts.
Okay.
And that means decisions about water access, about management, they have these really far-reaching implications. They influence everything from trade agreements and investment flows to how humanitarian crises are handled and ultimately regional stability. Nations are actively factoring water risk into their geopolitical math now. So yes, while it's absolutely clear that water scarcity can worsen migration pressures, intensify competition over resources, and even fuel conflicts, it also, as we touched on with the Middle East example, creates these undeniable opportunities for cooperation. This concept of hydrodiplomacy, it's really emerging as a critical new frontier in international relations. And it's possible that alliances formed around shared water security might actually prove more durable, more enduring than perhaps those driven purely by military might or traditional trade concerns.
Why is that?
Well, precisely because water is so utterly fundamental to every nation's survival and prosperity. It's a resource that truly, deeply compels shared responsibility. You can't escape that interdependence we talked about earlier.
That's a really compelling argument for a potentially different kind of global partnership. So, thinking about our listener, what does this all mean for you? Understanding these dynamics, it isn't just for policymakers or academics, right? It's crucial for all of us because water insecurity, wherever it happens, directly impacts global issues. We all care about things like food prices, energy security, even international migration patterns. The ripple effects of water scarcity in one region, they can genuinely be felt across the globe. They affect supply chains, economies, political stability, often far, far from the original source. It's just another reminder, really, of how interconnected our world is, often through the very water we all share. So just to recap, what we've explored today really hammers home this idea that water is, well, it's no longer some peripheral environmental issue. It is truly a central determinant of peace, of cooperation, and yes, of conflict in the 21st century. It's shaping our world in ways we're maybe only just beginning to fully grasp, pushing nations towards either confrontation or potentially innovative partnership.
And that brings us, I think, to a really provocative final thought, something for all of us, including you listening, to consider. As this century unfolds, the politics of water are going to increasingly reshape global and regional alliances, it seems very likely. The future world order, it might not be defined solely by the flow of oil through pipelines or the speed of digital networks. It might actually be defined, perhaps more fundamentally, by the rivers, the lakes, the reservoirs that sustain our civilizations. And this presents humanity with a fundamental choice, really. Will we descend into water wars, driven by rivalry and intense competition over this absolutely essential life-giving resource, or will we discover water solidarity, find ways towards collective management, innovative solutions, genuine cooperation? The implications of that choice for the future of humanity, for global stability, they're just profound. And they'll ultimately be decided by how we choose to manage this most essential of resources together or in rivalry. What aspect of this vital topic will you choose to explore next?